Hey, good morning everyone. Welcome back. It's Sew Together Tuesday. I'm Teresa Coates. I'm the National Educator for Shannon Fabrics, and I'm excited to be here again. We are working today on sewing a summer scarf. We're going to be working with the Embrace double gauze today. If you've been with us for the past few weeks, we've been working with our Cuddle Minky fabrics, and I've been teaching you how to do that. Today, we're going to talk about a whole new substrate that we call Embrace double gauze. It's 100% cotton, super great for all sorts of things. We're going to start with an easy project today, but you can use it for blankets and quilts, and I use it a lot for apparel. We'll talk more about that down the road, but there's lots of things you can do with it. So I want to introduce you to it, give you a good project to start with. We'll go from So the fabric that we have here is dear to me. It's an Embrace. It's 100% cotton. The other things that we have that you'll need to make this project are the cotton thread. We have some from Aurifil here today, some long flower head pins, and a hand sewing needle. I have long scissors. These are my favorites. These are from Kai. And then this is just a small rotary cutter. And I'm going to show you how to cut the fabric using both of those with the scissors and the rotary cutter. They both work, so it's just kind of a matter of which you prefer. Okay, so let me show you how to cut that. When you get it from the shop, get a yard at least, and that way you can make two scarves. And so if you make one and it doesn't turn out quite the way you want it to, or you mess something up, you have another one. If it turns out perfect, now you have two and you can give one away. Okay, so the fabric, when you pick it up from the store, they're going to cut it on these little lines. Okay, I want to open this up so you can see it. I'm going to show you the back of this, okay, so that you can see this little grid that's in there. All right, that grid is important in that that is your grain line here. Okay, so when they put the fabric together, the way that they construct it adds these little lines to it, and we're going to use those today. All right, so when you have your fabric, I'm going to go ahead and measure this at 18 inches. That's what I want to use. And I'm just going to put a little clip right there. Then I'm going to show you how I cut it. Okay, I'm going to feed my scissors right into that hole, and I'm going to cut along this line. Okay, and I'm just going to eyeball it, and that works well enough. Okay, and I'm just going to clip right along here. The reason I like these scissors is because they're nice and long, so I can actually do pretty long cuts. And I'm really just cutting basically along that line. I don't need to follow it exactly, just close enough. Okay, so I'm going to cut all the way through. And you probably can't see that line as well as I can. But if I turn it over, you might be able to see this one a little bit better. It shows up a little bit more from the back side. So if you're cutting this and you struggle a little, turn it over. Okay, and if you're cutting one of the darker fabrics, I suggest that you do it on one of these lighter mats. This is from DIY Style. Their mat is white. It's also magnetic, which is kind of awesome. But it also is easier to see through on some of it. If you're working with a lighter fabric using a regular board that's green, you can see through it. It works fine. But the darker fabric sometimes can be a little harder. If you have a light table you can see through that has the cutting mats, those work really well too. All right, so I'm just going to take my little rotary cutter. I've got a little guy here, and I like the little one because basically I can make mistakes and not get too far off the line, whereas if I was using like a 60 millimeter, if I go off, I go way off. Okay, so I'm just going to cut it all the way across, cutting along that line that I'm following here. Okay. All right, I'm going to cut it all the way across. So now I've got a second half that I'm just going to toss to the side for now, and we'll sew that up later. Okay, so I've got an 18-inch piece here that threw away the wrong side that had the not trimmed side. So I'm going to take the other one back. So here's my piece. This is 18 inches or so. Okay, I leave the selvages on because the selvages are just another place that it's not going to fray. So it's totally fine to leave those guys on there, and I'm just going to do that. So we're going to fold this right sides together. And I'm just going to pin it a few times. I don't need to pin it a lot because it's not going to move a whole lot. And also we're not trying to be super persnickety about where it is. We just need to keep it basically together, and I can sort of do that as I sew, moving my fingers along and keeping it in check. Okay, so I'm going to pin along this, and I'm going to sort of try to keep the lines together, and I can see them okay, where I'm going to keep it so that they're together here, so that we'll keep it on grain. All right, I'm going to do that along this whole side. I'm probably only going to pin 6 or 7 times, not too much. If you find that you're struggling with it a little bit, you can always pin it a little more, and that's fine. I just find that this doesn't move too much, and I'm okay pinning a little. So if you've been with us for the past couple of episodes, then I've been, pinning like crazy, because that's what I do with Cuddle. But the Embrace, you don't need to pin so much, which is nice. So the Embrace comes pre-shrunk on the bolt, just so you know. So it is pre-shrunk. You don't have to wash it before you sew with it. And I actually don't, because I like the sizing to stay in it. It gives it a little bit of body while I'm sewing with it. But you're welcome to wash it first and then just press it before you do this project. Okay, so now I'm going to take this over to my sewing machine. I've got it set at a 2.5 millimeter stitch length and just a straight stitch and a universal 70-10 needle. Okay, so we're gonna do a 1/2 inch seam allowance. You could do a smaller one if you'd like. I like to do a 1/2 inch because it'll give it enough room that if it should fray, it has some room to go. Also, you can serge this. So if you have a serger, this is a super quick project on a serger. Oh, zigzag. All right, so back that. All right, so now we're just gonna stitch right along here. I'm using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm just going to feed that right along. If I can see that this is getting off just a little, I'm just going to move it over and tick things around. Okay, and then I'm just going to sew. Like I said, it's a 2.5 stitch length, so kind of a typical stitch length if you're used to working with cotton. And what I've found is that the Embrace will gather a little if you're using a larger stitch length. So if you find that it's gathering, just shrink your stitch length. Even if you're starting at a 2.5 and it's gathering a little, just shrink it down and it'll work out. It'll work out a little better. Okay, so I'm gonna keep on going. Okay, we're gonna stitch all the way down this side, the 2.5 millimeter. I'm going to shove that over just a little. Getting out of the way just a tiny bit. Okay, but you can see it pretty well stays in place. Okay, so I'm going to keep going here. Okay, stitch all the way to the end and I'm going to back stitch again. I'm gonna bring it over here and I've got the whole thing stitched all along this side. And so now I'm just gonna turn it inside out. I'm just gonna stick my hand down here, reach the end, and turn it inside out. All right, so now I'm just gonna give this a quick press. You don't have to, but I like to just because it'll set the seam a little bit better. Okay, so I'm just gonna push it so that the seam allowance goes up just a little. Okay, and then I'll just move this along, press it up. All right, we'll move this over just a little and keep on pressing. Okay, you'll find that the double gauze really takes the iron nicely, and we don't actually have to iron too much. So usually I just press my seams is all I'm doing, and I'm just to sort of set them. But you won't ever have to iron again if you don't want to. The only time I ever really iron like the apparel is at the hem. Yeah, that's about it. So it's kind of great that way. All right, so I've got it all pressed. I've got my seams here. And I'm gonna pull this over. Okay, and so I've got my seams here and here. All right, so I've got this long like U-tube here. I'm gonna wanna fold these together and we're gonna add a little twist into it. So all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my edges, seams are here, okay, and I'm gonna just add a little twist right here. Okay, so instead of them bringing them straight over together, I add a little twist. I'm gonna show you again. Okay, so here's my seams. Instead of bringing it straight together, I'm just gonna add a little twist to it, all right? So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab this center part right here, okay, where they came together, and I'm gonna stick my hand in and I'm gonna pull it out. Ba-da. Okay, now we've got an inside out tube, which is pretty great. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pin it just a few times around here. and get these seam allowances twisted over in the right place. Now in the middle, I want to leave a little spot that I'm going to turn this. And I've found in all my classes here that if I do a 4 inches, because basically there's about an inch, that this will leave it for easy turning. So I'm going to pin this right here to show where I'm going to start and stop. And I'm going to do that with 2 pins. So I know that's my start-stop space. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to pin again here and pin that one twice. So this will be where I start, and I'll sew all the way around, and then I'll stop over there. Okay, so I'm going to add a couple more pins on this side, just to keep it in check. Okay, so now when I sew this part, I'm actually going to take the table off my sewing machine, so I can get that thing around. Okay, one of the nifty little tricks with sewing machines is that guy will come off. Okay, so we're going to stick this on, and I'm going to put it underneath so that I'm going to start where those 2 pins are, and I'm going to let the side of this foot run next to the selvage line. Okay, so I'm going to put my foot down, pull my pins out, and then I can start. But the first thing I'm going to do, once I've gotten this in, this is where I want my seam allowance to be, I'm actually going to turn this, and I'm going to sew off the edge. And what this does is creates a little strong point on it. I'll show you when we get back around. Okay. So now I'm going to turn it back to where it was, and I'm going to sew with this selvage just right along the side of that foot. Okay, and sew all the way around. Super duper easy. Make sure you're taking your pins out as you sew. Don't ever sew over them. You'll find that there might be a little bit, might seem a little bit looser on one side than another when you're working with the embrace, and you can always just sort of give it a little tension and make it feed in, which works out just fine. That is that trick for lots of things. All right, I'm going to sew all the way around. I see my 2 pins, so I'm going to stop there. Okay, so now I'm going to stop. I'm going to rotate like I did at the beginning. I'm going to sew off the edge and then back just a little. Okay, I'm going to cut my thread. All right, so now I've got it here. So find my little spot that I've done the little L shapes, and you can see it makes this corner really nice and strong. So when I turn it, it's not bound to rip it or pull a little hole in it or anything. Okay, so I found that 4 is good. So I'm going to reach my hand in here and I'm going to start pulling it out. Okay, and you can just sort of feed it out this way. Works beautifully. All right, so there we go. All nice and done. And so then what happens is when I have this and I can pull it nice and tight, and then I'm going to give it a little press. Okay, bring it back over here. I'll show you that I'm going to pin it. Okay, so those edges are together, those folds are together, and I can see them matching up nicely. Okay, so at this point, if you want to, you can totally hand stitch this. I don't really love hand stitching, so I'm going to sew it on the machine. And the way I do it is I change this to a zigzag. Okay, so I'm going to turn it to a zigzag with a 1.5 width and a 1.5 length. And this should catch just the edge of my fold and catch it together. So it isn't too bulky, but it also means I don't have to hand stitch it. So then I'm just going to go along here so that it catches just the edge of that. And we'll keep that closed for me. And I figure I'll just wear this with that at the back of my neck. It'll be totally fine. All right, back stitch, put the thread. There we go. All right, so you can see the zigzag just a little bit. I don't really mind too much, so I'll just clip my tails here, and then it's good to go. Okay, so then I turn it over. You can't really tell where that is anymore. When I put this on, I'm just going to go right at the back of my head, and you can do a little double twist if you want to. So I really love this scarf. It's perfect for summer evenings when it's cool outside. It's great in LA for all the seasons for it. I use it a lot, and it's still very breathable. So it's really nice addition to your wardrobe, and it's an easy project to do. So let me show you a couple other samples that we have. So this one is our rose Garden. Okay, so this one's a really sweet feminine print. And then this is one of our metallics. So we have a whole bunch of these online. So if you haven't checked out our Embrace fabrics, make sure to check out shannonfabrics.com and check out the Embrace. You'll see that there are a whole variety. The biggest things you need to know when you're working with the Embrace is that it's 100% cotton fabric, so you're going to treat it like that. So you're going to wash it in cool water. You're going to dry it. Low heat, high heat can make it shrink a little bit, though it does come pre-shrunk on the bolt, so it shouldn't shrink very much. It's really serger friendly. Use a 70-10 universal needle. We use cotton thread. I like to, when I wash it, I like to line dry it and then toss it into the dryer for a little bit to sort of soften it up. But that's my technique. You are welcome to dry it however you'd like. You can dry it on low or line dry. It's totally fine. It's great for lots of different projects. We'll work more with it down the road. Next week, we're going to be back and we're going to use this and the cuddle that we've been sewing with, and we're going to make a self-binding blanket. So if you've been wanting to learn how to do that, this is your opportunity. We'll be back next week. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer them, and thank you very much for coming. Thank you to all of our vendor partners for all the amazing products that they make that make sewing with Embrace and Cuddle easy. Until next week, happy sewing.